And the running mate is Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. And I think I speak for all of us when I say, thank God it wasn't Nikki Haley. The show starts now. So let me start off by saying this. Watching Donald J. Trump walk out at the RNC just 2 days after surviving an assassination attempt was one of the most powerful moments in American history, in case you missed it.
Welcome the next president of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
If tomorrow all the things were gone, I'd work for all my life, and I had to start again, just my children and my wife. Thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away.
That is our president, and now the VP pick is in, and it's Ohio Senator J.D. Vance.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Complicated business.
J.D. Vance. J.D. This guy turned out to be an absolute star. He's a great senator and a real fighter. He's a former Marine and a Yale-educated lawyer. He's a great student. J.D. knows how important it is to have leaders who put America first. He'll bring the toughness and intellectual firepower we need to champion our movement. He will fight for strong borders, fair trade, jobs, and he will be tough as you can be on crime. A truly MAGA all-star. Make America great again. He's an all-star.
So I'll be honest, initially it wasn't my first choice, but it wasn't my last choice either, because Vance represents a new generation, a fresh voice, and a Rust Belt senator that speaks to rural and to middle America. All good things, more on that later. But the news of the week is just getting rolling. After all, it's RNC convention week. We are still in the wake of an assassination attempt on former President Trump, and now we have the highly anticipated VP announcement. So that's good news and bad news for Joe Biden's failing campaign. On the one hand, the constant drumbeat from his own party about his cognitive decline and unfitness for office has quieted for the moment, maybe a little bit. But his campaign has also lost basically any remaining puff of steam it once had. After the assassination attempt on Trump's life, any discussion of him being an existential threat is really inappropriate. They might still try it, and they already have, but it's ill-advised. Plus, not only has the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Trump in the immunity case, his classified documents case has all but ended for good. Oh, and Joe is still failing physically and mentally, and even when reading off of a teleprompter in a controlled Oval Office setting, can't seem to get the words out. So there's that. So all Joe has left to campaign on is his worst nightmare, his own record. But how do Democrats really feel about all of that? Let me bring in former communications director to Congressman and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, and also former aide to President Obama, Michael Hardaway. Michael, it's great to have you, and I appreciate you being willing to come on and have this discussion.
No, this is going to be great. I'm looking forward to it.
So much to discuss, but I want to start off with the top, and that is the VP announcement from Donald Trump picking Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Now, it seems like the Biden team and the Harris team is excited about this, saying that can't wait for the vice president to meet J.D. Vance on that debate stage. I'm wondering how you feel about that. Are you confident in Vice President Kamala Harris being unburdened by what has been?
Well, first of all, you can never trust a grown man who still goes by initials. That's the first thing. The second thing is, look, the guy said he was a never Trumper, and he said a bunch of horrific things about Trump, and then he has joined him. I think it's an interesting decision for a guy who considers himself to be intelligent and seems to be self-made. What's also interesting is if you're down with Trump, what is the science behind this? Because theoretically, you're picking a VP that can get you an audience that you can already get. And presumably JD Vance's audience is the same thing that Donald Trump's audience is. And so it's an interesting pick. We'll see where it goes. I mean, I think you're kind of auditioning for the worst job in America because there is no autonomy or really a portfolio being Donald Trump's vice president. But it's an interesting decision.
So I want to dig into a couple things you said there. First, in all fairness, let's be honest, Vice President Kamala Harris on that debate stage ahead of 2020 essentially called Joe Biden a racist. So when we're talking about VP picks possibly having some harsh words for what ends up being their boss or the number one on their ticket, I mean, calling someone a racist, I get JD Vance has been a never Trumper. I've been critical of that as well. But let's be honest and let's call a spade a spade. But also talking about JD Vance, I don't necessarily disagree with you that he doesn't necessarily bring in a new voting bloc or a new demographic. I think what JD Vance represents really is that Rust Belt, that worker, which I think Donald Trump was already going to do famously well with anyway this go around. So I don't necessarily disagree, but I'm wondering what you think about bringing somebody in who is 39 years old, does represent a fresh face. Do you think, in contrast to what the Democrat side is offering, in that the top of their ticket is an 81-year-old man that its own party doesn't want, do you think having someone young might be an asset to the Trump side of things?
Well, the issue with JD Vance is he seems to be a smart guy, but he's also kind of a hypocrite in that, he's self-made, which is respectable, and made his own money, but he seems to kind of hate rich people, although, he's funded by Peter Thiel, who is a rich guy and seems to be his puppeteer. So he's an interesting guy in that contrast. As you look at vice presidential options and Kamala and JD at a debate, that would be incredibly interesting because I think JD Vance is a guy who doesn't have a clear grasp on policy. To the point that you made, he seems to resonate incredibly well with the Rust Belt and working class Americans, and that matters. It matters a lot. And so it'll be interesting to see how they debate. I do think Kamala has a firm grasp on a number of pertinent issues Americans are facing. And so she'll be able to give some real perspective there, specifically around economics and specifically around international affairs. The president has allowed her to be involved in a meaningful way over the past few years. And so I think that makes a difference.
You think so? Let's be honest.
It does.
Vice President, I want to say this. I want to be fair because I don't want to just dog on the woman. I do believe that in the past, when Vice President Harris was a senator, I do believe that she had some shining moments, objectively speaking, where she was able to articulate her position that I disagree with, but she was able to articulate it well. I will give her that. She was a prosecutor. I will give her that. But I feel, being objective, not just because I'm a Republican and a Trump supporter, but I feel that she has wasted a golden opportunity for the last 3.5 years as vice president. I don't think she's done anything of note. I think maybe she was set up to fail by being named the border czar and then, of course, not really czaring anything other than an invasion. So I think that she's had an opportunity to really take a lead, especially with Joe Biden being in his cognitive state. I haven't seen her take that bull by the horns, so to speak. And I've yet to see it, even in discussions in your own party talking about maybe Kamala rising to the top of that ticket. I haven't seen anything from her that has signaled to me that she even wants that job. Do you disagree with that?
Listen, I'm really looking forward to disagreeing with you on a lot of stuff. I can't disagree with that entire notion. I think she's done a very good job on certain things. So to your point, the border thing, I don't really think she could have won that situation. I don't know what she could have done. I do know that she has gotten a lot more access as vice president than Biden had when he was Brock's vice president. And so because she's got a chance to get face-to-face meetings with international leaders and prime ministers who come to the White House and meet with the president, I think she has a better grasp of where we are as a nation and how to do the job of president than previous vice presidents. I do think there have been failures, as you can expect when you try something. I do also think that, look, when your boss is 81 years old or so, you have a real opportunity to be more aggressive with your schedule. And I think there's more she probably could have done there as well. So to be fair, I think you have some points, and I disagree with others.
Okay. Well, I want to get into that too, because, there's a lot to talk about on your side of the aisle, and I want to get your take on all of it, because your take is the take that matters, the Democrat take on your ticket is what matters, really. I mean, you guys have to make that decision, not me. I don't care what you guys do. I think it's going to be interesting. But I do want to go back and talk about, obviously, the news that's still very important to discuss, and that's the assassination attempt on former President Trump. A lot of information coming out. It was a complete and colossal failure of security. I think that the Secret Service director needs to resign. I think that it is absolutely horrible what happened and that it was allowed to happen in that way. And I also want to say this. There are a lot of people that are trying to pin what happened and the assassination attempt on Democrats and on the media. I will not go that far because I don't like it when it happens on the other side. I don't like when something horrible happens and a nutcase goes and shoots something up. I don't like it when they say, oh, Republican rhetoric. I don't like it. I don't think you can really blame anybody outside of the nutcase that does it. However, I do think that there is interesting discussion to be had about, in the wake of the event, President Biden's address in the Oval Office calling for unity, and then a day later, sitting down last night with Lester Holt. I think that he missed an opportunity to be the unifier that he says he is. And I want to play a clip for you, in particular, him repeating a now very debunked lie about Charlottesville. Let's take a listen, and I want to get your take.
Lester, I got in this race early on in 2020 for the 2020 race. I wasn't going to run again because I lost my son. I didn't feel, and until I watched what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. Those folks coming out of the woods with torches, carrying swastikas, singing the same Nazi bile. It was accompanied by this Ku Klux Klan, and a young woman was killed. And I was a bystander. And the then president was asked, what do you think? He said, they're very fine people on both sides. Not fine people on both sides. No excuse.
All right, debunked. That was taken out of context. Do you think that was smart for the current president to repeat that?
So I'm going to address that, but I think your first statement was more important about the Secret Service, so I'll circle back to that. Listen, honestly, the general gist of what the president said is accurate, and we all know that Donald Trump has said many incendiary things that have ignited many on the right that may be deranged, but I think that's ancillary. Here's the more important thing. There's a chance in a bipartisan way to move forward as it relates to protecting our electeds. And United States Secret Service, I mean, I think the video spoke for itself in so many different ways, but we as Democrats and Republicans can come together now and figure out a better way forward. So for instance, I don't know if this is accurate, but I read that apparently the rules of engagement for the Secret Service say that they cannot shoot until the president is fired upon. If that is accurate, that's insane, right? So I think that's one thing, for instance, the Democrats and Republicans can work together in Congress to work with the Secret Service on fixing. That's where we should be at this particular moment, not pointing fingers about what people have said and done, but saying, let's work together now in this opportunity to make sure everyone is physically safe and to make sure that our democracy is safe because of that. That's where I want to go.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think the fact that he was allowed to crawl up on that building while people are literally shouting, there's a man crawling up on the building with a weapon. I mean, the fact that that was allowed to go on and that we have so much camera footage now of people trying to warn law enforcement, something went terribly wrong here. There's going to be an investigation. I think some people probably should be fired. This is no little thing. This could have been an assassination of a former president and a leading candidate to be the future president. So this is, to me, just such a dereliction of duty on so many different levels. I hope we get to the bottom of it. But in going back to that Lester Holt interview, you know, I give him credit for sitting down and doing it, I guess, but I feel like he was very combative. And I don't think it was helpful to his case. When you're trying to, I guess, reassure your own party that you should be at the head of the ticket and you sit down and you say to Lester Holt numerous times, like, come on, man, and you criticize the media that's been very kind to Joe Biden for the last 3.5 years, I thought that he kind of made a mistake.
Listen, there are a few things here. The first thing is the president should never do one of these again. First of all, there's no value in doing that from a polling perspective or from a voting perspective. The second thing is many of Lester Holt's questions were disingenuous, as have been the overall Beltway media as it relates to the president and his health. And what the president did was the right thing to do, which is to say, why do you keep asking me stupid questions about whether I've seen tape from a debate a month ago when you failed to at all question the idea that the other guy has lied dozens of times? And so the point here is that
Michael, do you really think that the media hasn't covered Donald Trump? Do you really think that the media, I mean, just be honest here.
1,000,000%. I will tell you this,
You
Tommy.
think the media has coddled Donald Trump and been friendly to Donald Trump?
Two separate Beltway reporters told me over drinks in an off-the-record capacity during 2020, I kind of hope Trump wins because he's great for our business. That was said to me, and that is the mindset of many of the elite Beltway reporters, and that's why you see such poor coverage of the president. And here's the thing, Tommy. If I'm running Joe Biden's campaign, I'm saying you don't need these interviews for several reasons. You're still polling neck and neck with Donald Trump in battleground states in general. I just saw a poll a few days ago from PBS that showed he's up 6 points nationwide against Donald Trump. You've got the National Finance Committee still on your side, which is the main fundraising operation for the Democratic Party in the campaign. They're still with you, right? You've got inflation at 3%. It was 9% 2 years ago. You've got historically low unemployment. You've got historic highs for the S&P and the Dow. He's kicking ass out here. That's what he should be running on, not talking to Lester Holt, who's regurgitating questions that was written by a guy in the other room. That's why Joe Biden should do that instead of giving these interviews that are meaningless. They provide no value at all. Well, and the last thing I'd say to you, Tommy, is what we need today is Washington from the 60s and 70s, which was an era where bipartisanship and close personal relationships with the other party were standard. When I worked in the Senate, Joe Biden was a guy who was friends with John McCain and John Warner and all these other guys. They were personal friends, right? And that was the foundation for their work every single day, even when they disagreed. That's where we need to go. And I can tell you that Leader Jeffries thinks that very same way. You know, he was very good friends with Doug Collins, obviously a conservative Republican from Georgia, and a number of other members on the right. And that's where we need to go going forward instead of pointing fingers about what people have said and what they have done.
I don't disagree with you on that. I wish we could go back to that. It's really hard, though, when one side of the aisle is still actively calling the former president and current Republican candidate Hitler. I mean, it's hard to be like, yeah, let's have kumbaya moments.
Well, that's what the vice president called him too, remember? I mean, he did say that.
Well, I don't disagree with you that that was inappropriate. I don't think likening anybody to Hitler is appropriate. I don't think that that should be used by anybody in any capacity on either side. I just think it's wrong. And I don't think that you should call someone an existential threat unless you think that they are truly an existential threat, which goes back to some of this conversation. A lot of it I get on social media. But it is right to point out that I understand and I applaud a lot of Democrats after the assassination attempt for coming out and saying there's no place for political violence. Our thoughts and prayers with Donald Trump and his family. I appreciate that. And I think that that was wise, smart, and appropriate. However, it is kind of interesting, and I'm wondering your take on this. How do you go from one day saying this guy is literally an existential threat, he is Hitler, and then saying we have our thoughts and prayers with Hitler? Do you think that there's a little bit of a dissonance there, and maybe that they are maybe a little bit hypocritical? I mean, either you think this guy is Hitler or your thoughts and prayers are with him. Can you have both?
So let's be honest. This horrific event happened. And in the aftermath of that, you had several House Republicans and others on the outside personally attacking the president and Democrats in a way that wasn't necessary, in a way that was antithetical to what President Biden and others tried to do, which was strike a note of unity. Again, the idea of characterizations and pointing fingers is stupid at this point in terms of where we are as a country, and we have to move forward as adults. There's way too much emotion in this conversation. I expect voters to be emotional, but as electeds, and the people that work with them and advise them, we all should be smarter and we all should be functioning as adults and say, we disagree, but we agree on certain things. Let's focus on that. The stuff we disagree on is perfectly fine. The other guy doesn't hate America. I don't hate America. We can be friends and we can work together.
Okay, well, I can appreciate that. I want to talk about your side of the aisle now. And I want you, and I ask every time I have a Democrat, a liberal, anybody who's left of center on that's brave enough to come on and talk to me, I ask him this question, and I ask for as much honesty as you can possibly give me in your position. Do you want President Joe Biden to be at the top of your ticket? Now, I'm not saying will he, won't he? I'm saying, do you want, as a Democrat, do you want Joe Biden at the top of your ticket come November?
You know, this is like a baseball game where a guy's thrown a no-hitter through 8 innings, and then we want to yank him because we say, well, you've done enough. We all know Joe Biden's old. That's fine. But he's earned the right to run again and be our candidate and be our president because inflation is now 3%, a third of what it was 2 years ago, because we have historically low unemployment that he has delivered, because we have historically high Black roof, and corporate profits are through the roof, and America is through the roof. That's why. And by the way, having insulin at $35 was incredibly helpful for all the working class Americans across this country, in the Rust Belt, in Ohio, and in the South, and all these other places. That is a Democratic production. President Biden led that effort. And so that is why he should be the candidate again.
I'm going to ask you this. I'm not gonna push back on Biden's record, because we could sit here all day and I could tell you that the American people are struggling and they're not seeing this wonderful record in the grocery store, at the gas pump.
I'm just giving numbers.
We could go back and forth on it. I mean,
sure.
y'all got to convince the American people that things are hunky-dory. Right now, I don't think the American people are convinced things are hunky-dory. But I'm not going to speak for everybody, and I'm not even going to go into that, because it would be too long of a discussion, and I would have my numbers and you would have yours. And unless we're going to sit here and do a fact check all day, it would be too long of a discussion. But I am going to ask you this. After you watch that debate, and after you've watched Joe Biden over the last at least 6 months, I would say years, you'd probably say the last few months, watch him struggle on numerous occasions, and watch him at the debate quite obviously struggle. Do you think it's fair, when you say he's earned the right, do you think it's fair for your own party, which they are doing, to question his ability to run again and be president for another 4 years?
You know, it's difficult because I remember him from the Senate and obviously from the White House with President Obama, and he was an incredibly sharp, charming, brilliant guy. And obviously there's been a decline that is hard to watch, frankly, and it's kind of painful in a way, because you know who the guy used to be. And so it's always fair when someone is in their late 70s to question their ability, whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden, because, you know, I don't want to get back and forth with this, but obviously there are many things with Trump mentally that I question as well. So I do think it's fair. It's always fair. What I say is I'm a big fan of results and production. And so for my party, the question is, what are the results? What has he produced? And how is he doing polling wise? If you're telling me he's neck and neck with Donald Trump in the battleground states and he's doing well nationally, well, then what's your case for pulling him?
Well, I think the case is that you can say he's had this tremendous record. You got to sell that to the American people. I don't. But what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying essentially like, we can have a shell of a man who's not really capable of articulating himself, staying up late into the night and answering the call of the job, because the shell of a man has gotten what we think he's gotten done. But do you think that, though? Because if you're saying, hey, listen,
I didn't say that.
But what you're saying is you think he has a good record and you think he's polling well. Okay, but if he can't do the job physically and mentally, is that not also a consideration that you have? And I'm not saying it. Nancy Pelosi's saying it. Your former boss, President Obama, is saying it. George Clooney is saying it. Your media pundits across the spectrum, including Van Jones and many others who are far to the left, they are the ones saying it. Are they wrong?
First of all, an actor's opinion should never matter in politics.
I agree with you, but shoot, he's raising a lot of money for your guy.
It's a crime that they ran an op-ed from him. But what I'd say to you is this. By the way, Donald Trump did fall asleep yesterday in the first day of the convention. But nonetheless.
Listen, Michael, the man was shot 2 days ago. He got up off the stage, walked off. I don't think any comparison at this point for Democrats to be like, well, I think that President Trump is failing. The man literally got shot in the ear and he goes to a convention 2 days later. Your guy had a 90-minute debate.
What does that have to do with him falling asleep? It has nothing to do with him falling asleep.
I mean, to say that he's not physically capable when the man literally survived an assassination attempt.
During his trial. He fell asleep during the trial.
I'd fall asleep during one of those trials too. If I had to sit in a room and listen to something ad nauseum, I would also fall asleep. But let's just be fair.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it. I'm asking you to address your party, not mine. I don't care if you run a vegetable. I'm asking you from your party's perspective, because it's your party that's saying it. Your party is worried. The majority of your voters are worried. Do you think that they are wrong to be worried about Joe Biden?
I don't think, again, for any candidate that's over 75 years old, I don't think that it's a problem to be worried about any of them, whether it's Nancy Pelosi as a member of Congress who's over 75, or whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump. It's always fair because there is a physical and mental decline for anyone in their late 70s and on. So it's always a fair question. What I tell people is, let's take the emotion out of this and talk turkey. to your point, the guy is old. We all know that he's old. And so he should have the option to make that decision for himself because he has delivered. Your point about him being old is a fair one. I just think that, particularly as it relates to the media for this, it's just overblown and insane to ask the same question every single week, which is what we've seen with the political media and Joe Biden, particularly with the New York Times, which seems to have this weird obsession and has written over 160 articles on the same topic surrounding his age.
Well, I think it's fair to have a question about it.
160?
I mean, you know what I think is funny? I'm just when people on the left attack leftist media, I'm going to let y'all do it because I don't care.
But they're not leftist media. People always say that, but like I deal with Times reporters and have for years. I mean, first of all, there are many very moderate to Republican reporters. There are many op-ed right-wing writers on the Times as well.
Okay, well, I will give you that. I would think, to be fair, the media is not on Trump's side. I think that that's fair, and you can disagree, but I think most people would agree that the media really doesn't like Trump, by and large. But I do want to ask you this. Let's say in a world, and I know that you're saying Joe has he's got the delegates, he's got the votes, I understand that. He might very well remain your candidate. If it's not Joe Biden, if Joe Biden himself says, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, I am dropping out, who do you want at the top of your ticket and who has the best chance to defeat Donald Trump?
You know, it's an interesting question because I've thought about this and I don't have a number one quarterback. I've got three people and two of them should be in the mix and I'm not sure what the final two should be.
All right, give me the names.
I've got Kamala in there. I've got J.B. Pritzker, who I think is actually a star in so many different ways. And obviously, Gavin Newsom is incredibly talented as well. I think you should pull from two of those three people, and Pritzker should definitely be one of those people. I think there are many things he brings. You know, it's interesting. In some way, Pritzker reminds me of a smarter, saner Donald Trump, and that he is a trust fund kid who has an understanding of what the working class thinks and how they live. And I think that's an interesting skill to have. And so I'm a big fan of J.B. Pritzker in that conversation.
I haven't heard his name floated as much as the others. I do think it's interesting, though, that when I talk to Democrats, liberals, those left of center, when I say, who do you want to replace Joe, nobody that I've had on or had the opportunity to speak with has said definitively Kamala. And I think it's interesting because none of you have done it. And I've talked to a lot of folks on your side who have jobs like yours that are in communications that are incredibly smart and savvy. And I don't hear anybody saying like, yes, it's naturally Kamala that should take that position. Why do you think that is?
You know, what's interesting is I've talked to a bunch of friends about this, and I don't know the answer to that question. What I've actually heard from a lot of people is, you know, the hope is that Joe Biden wins and the next person up is none of the three people that I just mentioned. It would have been Wes Moore with like a J.B. Pritzker as the vice president. I can't tell you why Kamala is never the first person that people mention.
Yeah, you can. You know why.
No, I'm being honest with you. I don't know the answer. Like,
You're
I think they're just some people that
you've seen the polls. You know her approval rating is low.
Yeah, but that's not why I think we're having this conversation in terms of why I don't know. I just don't know. Like Barack, for instance, is the most talented person I've ever known. And I knew he was going to be president because he could do a lot more than anyone I'd ever seen. I don't feel that way about many other people in my party. And I think that speaks to why that answer is not clear.
Last question for you. If it's between Kamala and Gavin Newsom, who do you think has a better chance to beat Donald Trump?
It's an interesting question.
Just trying to be honest with me, because I know that you know.
You know what? I think it actually might be Kamala. I honestly don't know much about Newsom in terms of his policies. I know that people in California seem to love him.
Do they really? Because he's almost recalled. But take a spin around California and tell me if those policies are working out.
All right, well, listen, my California is like Los Angeles and like West Hollywood. So the people I've spoken with there have said that anecdotally, right? So my answer to you is Kamala, because I think she can patch together a wider coalition than Gavin Newsom could.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. We'll see how it all plays out. I really appreciate you coming on and having the discussion. I think it's so important to have discussions like these. And I also appreciate that you too want to return to a time when we could have dialogue and discussion and discourse and just be honest and open with one another without vilifying each other. I do think that most Americans love this country on the right and the left. So I appreciate that. And I think that's the tone that we all need to keep in the back of our mind moving forward. And I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. It's been great.
God bless. All right, folks. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, a new voice in the movement, is the VP pick, and I have some final thoughts. So, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance is the pick. Like I said, he's not my first choice, but he's not my last choice either. And on the positive side, he is the embodiment of the American dream. He's relatable, and his story of growing up poor and working his way up to become a senator is an inspirational and an aspirational one. Rural, lower, and middle-class Americans can relate to that story, and the Rust Belt states can see themselves in him, and that's good, and it's important. Now, most of those folks, those forgotten Americans, were already going to vote for Donald Trump, so I'm not sure he brings in a new crowd, but it's still too early to tell, and you never know. I will say he does represent a younger generation, and that can't be overlooked in this race because the party and both parties need young energy. Also, thank goodness Donald Trump didn't cave to the Kumbaya Unity song and pick Nikki Haley. I mean, seriously, thank God. J.D. Vance isn't a fan of endless wars, and for that, I am very grateful. But here is the one blind spot I'm a little concerned about, and that's the abortion issue. All right, J.D. Vance is very pro-life, and there is nothing wrong with that. I totally understand. But if you think the Democrats aren't going to exploit and overblow that abortion ban scare, you don't know the left. That's really all the Democrats have in this election at this point. It's abortion. It's the one issue they can sway women and independents on, and I worry about it just as I did after that pink splash of a red wave in 2022. If J.D. Vance sticks on Trump's message of opposing a federal ban and leaving it to the states, I think all will be okay. But any talk of a federal or a national ban on abortion or coming even close to that in Houston, we have a problem. All things considered, I don't think this VP choice makes much of a difference because Trump has incredible momentum right now, and it should continue. But the games are just beginning, so get your popcorn. Those are my final thoughts. Please be sure to like and subscribe to the show on YouTube at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless and take care. What's up, guys? Thank you for watching Tomi Lahren is Fearless. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you'll never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday and I hope you'll join me.